Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of the Frederick Valentich Disappearance. Australian pilot reported a UFO then vanished mid-transmission. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. At 7:06 p.m. on October 21, 1978, a 20-year-old Australian pilot named Frederick Valentich took off from Melbourne's Moorabbin airport in a Cessna 182 on a routine training flight across the Bass Strait to King Island. 47 minutes later, he radioed Melbourne Air Traffic Control with a report that would become the most baffling aviation mystery in Australian history. There was an aircraft above him, he said, a large aircraft flying very fast with 4 bright landing lights. He could not identify the type. The aircraft passed over him and then hovered. It was orbiting him, he reported, and it was not an aircraft like any he had seen. Melbourne Control asked what he intended to do. Valentich said the aircraft was hovering and was not an aircraft. Then the radio transmission ended with 17 seconds of an unidentified metallic scraping sound. Then silence. Frederick Valentich, his Cessna, and any explanation for what he encountered have never been found. Valentich was the only person in Australia's history to disappear during a documented UFO encounter, a fact the Australian Department of Transport noted in the official accident report, which was closed with the finding the reason for the disappearance of the aircraft has not been determined. A massive search of the Bass Strait found no wreckage, no oil slick, no life raft, no debris. In fact, nothing from the Cessna, an aircraft that would have left substantial recognizable debris on the water's surface had it crashed, was ever found. The transcript of Valentich's final transmission was released by Australian authorities and has been analyzed exhaustively by aviation experts, psychologists, astronomers, and UFO researchers for nearly 50 years. The conventional explanations that Valentich became disoriented and was looking at his own reflection in a cloud layer, that he was misidentifying Venus or another celestial body, that he faked his own disappearance, all fail to account for some feature of the evidence. The disorientation hypothesis requires ignoring the specific and detailed description Valentich provided. The Venus hypothesis requires ignoring that Valentich was a trained pilot who had seen Venus before. The fake disappearance hypothesis requires explaining how a young man with no money and no connections vanished a Cessna 182 without anyone ever finding it or him afterward. Valentich was frightened. That is clear from the audio recording of the final transmission. And whatever frightened him in the sky above Bass Strait has never been identified. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Human perception is fallible. This is not an insult, it is neuroscience. The brain does not passively record reality, it actively constructs it, filling gaps with expectation, inferring causes from insufficient data, and storing memories that are reshaped by subsequent experience. Eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of courtroom evidence precisely because what people see and what actually happened frequently diverge. Sound can cause visual hallucinations. Infrasound at specific frequencies can produce feelings of dread, the sensation of a presence, and even visual disturbances. Sleep deprivation, stress, and hypoxia can generate vivid experiences indistinguishable from waking reality. All of this is relevant when evaluating modern mysteries. Many apparently anomalous experiences have prosaic explanations rooted in human neurology, temporal lobe activity, hypnagogic hallucinations, shared social expectation shaping perception. A willingness to consider these explanations is not dismissiveness, it is intellectual hygiene. The brain is capable of generating extraordinarily convincing experiences that have no external cause, and yet, the perceptual explanation has its limits. It cannot account for physical evidence, radiation burns, landing traces, electromagnetic interference on electronic equipment, or anomalous readings on calibrated instruments. When multiple independent witnesses, separated by distance, report identical details, mass hallucination strains credulity. When physical measurements corroborate subjective experience, the neurological explanation is insufficient. These are the cases that demand another look. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Frederick Valentich disappearance, Australian pilot reported a UFO, then vanished mid-transmission, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Frederick Valentich was a 20-year-old student pilot from Melbourne who had accumulated approximately 150 hours of flying time. He was a member of the Air Training Corps and was enthusiastic about UFOs. He reportedly read extensively on the subject and believed in extraterrestrial visitors. His father has stated that Frederick was a careful and methodical pilot who was not prone to exaggeration or fantasy. The flight to King Island was a training exercise he had flown before. He filed a flight plan and checked in with Melbourne Flight Service during the flight before his final transmission. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the transcript of Valentich's final radio transmission, released by Australian authorities and subsequently published internationally, spans approximately 7 minutes. Key elements: at 7:06 p.m. he reported an aircraft at his altitude with 4 bright lights. At 7:07 he said it had passed over him at least 1,000 feet above. At 7:08 he described it as long with a shiny surface, traveling south to north at high speed. At 7:09 he reported it was orbiting him and that his engine was running roughly. At 7:10 he said it is not aircraft, and then the transmission ended with an unidentified metallic scraping or grinding sound lasting 17 seconds before the channel went silent. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine, The Bass Strait search operation was one of the most intensive in Australian aviation history. The Royal Australian Air Force, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, and private vessels searched the likely crash zone for 4 days after the disappearance. The search area was based on Valentich's last known position and the aircraft's fuel load, which would have been exhausted approximately 30 minutes after the last transmission. No wreckage, fuel slick, personal effects, or human remains were found in the search area or subsequently. A Cessna 182 that ditches in water or crashes into the sea leaves identifiable debris, aluminum airframe components, foam seat cushions, fuel that would float for days. But none was found. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, a possible UFO incident was reported independently that same evening in the Bass Strait area. A group of people at Cape Otway, which Valentich had flown over approximately 20 minutes before his final transmission, reported seeing a green light moving rapidly across the sky at approximately 6:45 p.m., 20 minutes before Valentich's encounter. In the Ormond area, a witness reported photographing a bright green light with a metallic object below it at approximately 7:00 p.m., directly before Valentich's transmission. These independent reports of unusual aerial phenomena in the same geographic area on the same evening are not conclusive, but are consistent with an actual atmospheric phenomenon rather than pilot disorientation. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the official investigation by the Australian Department of Transport examined all conventional explanations for the disappearance and the reported encounter. The disorientation hypothesis, that Valentich had become spatially disoriented and misidentified his own aircraft's reflection or other optical phenomenon as a separate craft, was considered but found inconsistent with Valentich's training level and the specific details of his description. The report noted that the aircraft had not been found and that no definitive cause of the accident could be established. The file was classified as disappeared. The reason for the disappearance of the aircraft has not been determined. This classification has never been changed. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. In 1983, a member of the public discovered aircraft wreckage at Flinders Island in the Bass Strait that initially appeared to match a Cessna 182. Intensive examination determined that the wreckage was not from Valentich's aircraft. Various subsequent reports of wreckage or human remains in the strait have been investigated and ruled out. In 2012, a researcher named Keith Basterfield compiled all known UFO report data for the Bass Strait region for October 21, 1978, and found more than 20 separate UFO reports filed on that date from locations across a wide area of southeastern Australia, suggesting an unusual pattern of aerial phenomena that extended well beyond the Valentich encounter. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Frederick Valentich disappearance. Australian pilot reported a UFO Then Vanished Mid-Transmission. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the spatial disorientation theory, the preferred mainstream explanation, proposes that Valentich became spatially disoriented while flying over water at dusk, a known hazard for inexperienced pilots, and that what he interpreted as another aircraft above him was in fact his own reflection in a haze layer, a misidentified celestial object, or the lights of a vessel on the water below him. Under this model, his aircraft eventually crashed into the Bass Strait after he lost control or ran out of fuel, and the absence of wreckage is attributed to the currents and depth of the strait. This theory is plausible mechanically, but requires dismissing the specific details of Valentich's 7-minute description. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the hoax and disappearance theory proposes that Valentich fabricated the encounter and deliberately flew away from his filed flight path, possibly to King Island or another location, to fake his own death and start a new life. Proponents note Valentich's known interest in UFOs as a possible motive for staging a UFO encounter. Critics note that this theory requires explaining how Valentich disposed of a Cessna 182 aircraft worth tens of thousands of dollars without any financial trail, how a 20-year-old with no apparent resources established a new identity in 1978 without detection, and why he has never contacted family members in the 46 years since. No plausible candidate for Valentich's subsequent life has ever been identified. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the UFO encounter theory, supported by the UFO research community, takes Valentich's description at face value and proposes that he encountered an actual unidentified aerial phenomenon. Under this interpretation, the 17 seconds of metallic scraping sound at the end of the transmission may represent an interaction between the Cessna and the unknown object, and the disappearance of both Valentich and his aircraft without trace may indicate an event that conventional physics does not explain. Proponents cite the independent UFO reports from the same evening as supporting evidence. This theory is unfalsifiable in its current form, but is consistent with the complete absence of wreckage. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Frederick Valentich disappearance. Australian pilot reported a UFO, then vanished mid-transmission, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the audio recording of the final transmission is the primary evidence and has been subjected to extensive analysis. Voice stress analysis conducted by researchers in the 1980s found vocal patterns consistent with genuine fear and anxiety rather than theatrical performance. The changes in Valentich's voice over the 7-minute transmission follow the pattern of real distress rather than rehearsed speech. The 17-second metallic sound at the end of the transmission has been analyzed by audio engineers and has not been matched to any known sound source. It is not feedback, static, engine noise, or any identified electronic artifact. Its origin remains unknown. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the complete absence of wreckage from the Cessna 182 is powerful evidence that something unusual occurred. Aviation accident investigators note that aircraft that crash into water at normal flying speeds leave substantial debris fields, aluminum panels, wiring, avionics, upholstery foam that float and are detectable for days by aerial search. The Bass Strait search was comprehensive for 4 days in favorable weather conditions. The absence of any trace of the aircraft 46 years after the disappearance suggests that either the aircraft is in a location not covered by the search area or that the aircraft ceased to exist in a manner that did not produce floating debris. Both possibilities are anomalous. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the independent UFO reports from southeastern Australia on the evening of October 21, 1978, compiled by Keith Basterfield and other researchers, represent corroborating evidence of unusual aerial activity that does not depend on accepting Valentich's account. More than 20 reports filed by independent witnesses describing bright lights or metallic objects in the sky that evening, across a geographic area extending from Cape Otway to Ormond, suggest a real phenomenon that multiple people observed. If these reports are genuine, they establish that something unusual was in the skies over southeastern Australia on the evening Valentich disappeared, a context that makes his report more credible than it would be if it were truly isolated. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Frederick Valentich disappearance. Australian pilot reported a UFO then vanished mid-transmission. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. the Valentich disappearance remains officially unsolved and is one of the most discussed cases in aviation history outside of mainstream crash investigations. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, maintains the case in its historical records, with the original finding unchanged. In 2012, the ATSB reviewed the available evidence again and confirmed that no new information had emerged to allow a definitive determination of the cause. The Australian government holds no additional classified information about the case, a point that has been confirmed through Freedom of Information requests filed by multiple researchers. The 40th anniversary of the disappearance in 2018 generated significant media coverage in Australia and internationally, with several new documentary treatments and a major reassessment by aviation and UFO researchers. The case has become a reference point in the broader debate about the reality of UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, which gained new scientific and governmental legitimacy in the United States following the 2017 release of military UAP videos. Researchers have noted that Valentich's case, a trained pilot, a 7-minute real-time description corroborating independent witnesses, and a total absence of conventional crash evidence, represents one of the strongest documented UAP encounters in the historical record, regardless of what the ultimate explanation turns out to be. Frederick Valentich has never been found. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Frederick Valentich disappearance. Australian pilot reported a UFO, then vanished mid-transmission from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Valentich ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.